Hi, this is Ann Hackman Green Talk. We have a great show today. We have Ken Lee, who is the co-founder and president of Lotus Foods. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Ken on the show is actually by mistake I found him. Many of you know that I've got this big arsenic and rice campaign going on. And one of my green sisters actually sent me an email and said, "Do you know about Lotus Foods?" And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Lotus Foods. They're doing everything you're talking about in your campaign. That's great." And I said, I got to talk to Ken. So now we have Ken on the show. And Ken, I had some time to talk to you off the show before we've done this interview. And one of the things that really struck me is that you're doing this more crop per drop. And I wanted you to tell my viewers exactly what that is and how that affects arsenic uptake for rice.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Anna. The whole More Crop Per Drop initiative came to us by way of Cornell University. They had been working with farmers all around the world to teach them a new way to grow rice, which is more ecologically minded, an eco-agricultural method of growing rice, if you will. And they had the wisdom way long ago to say marketing has to be part of the solution for these farmers who are growing rice more sustainably. And so they cold called us and they said, we're teaching farmers to grow rice without flooding the fields, and it saves on all this water. And how would you like to be the private sector market partner to connect these farmers to your existing distribution channel? And so we were enthralled with the idea. I would say it was our light bulb moment, where all the work that we'd been doing all these years, working with farmers to move them from conventional farming to organic farming, all of a sudden in one moment we realized it's not good enough to grow rice organically, that we really need to focus on sustainable rice type of methodologies, like the system of rice intensification. And that's what it's known in throughout the world. And we've chosen to call it More Crop Per Drop because I think it's just more easier to as a marketing tool, and it's not another one of those acronyms like SRI, which is meaningless to people. So this is actually revolutionary, and I don't use that term lightly. In that, let's just start with the problem of how rice is grown. And most people are not aware that it takes about 600 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of rice. And so on an annual basis, that means it takes upwards of 25 to 30% of Earth's fresh water to produce rice on this planet. So that, of course, that's way too much water when you consider that there's not enough water for human beings to drink, or for human sanitation, or just for letting water flow back in recharge into groundwater systems, which are invariably are fragile ecosystems. So underwater, rice is unable to breathe, the root systems can't breathe, the soil can't breathe. It's a hypoxic environment where there's no oxygen, and that causes a myriad of problems, including the one I'm sure we're going to talk about, arsenic in rice. But the first one I'd like to point out is that when you have those anaerobic conditions where nothing can breathe, the roots of the plant are rotting away over the 120, 150 days that they're growing in the field. And the rotting is methane gas. And methane is a 20 times more noxious greenhouse gas than, say, CO2. And so what methane does, it traps CO2 in our environment and heats up the planet. And so rice fields constitute the #2 man-made reason for methane on the planet, right behind cows. So another thing, with all that standing water in rice fields, it creates malaria diseases. All those mosquitoes create malaria. And of course, malaria is a huge public health issue around the planet. And you just look at the sheer numbers of dollars that organizations like Gates and Rockefeller put into mosquito netting and vaccines and that type of thing. And if you just pulled the plug on rice fields, I think you'd cut a big part of that equation out.
People are probably saying, after you've talked about not having to flood the fields, why do they flood the fields?
Yeah, so that's the big question, right? And so flooding fields is a tremendous way to control weeds. And so, weeds are a big problem in agriculture, and And in rice, if you don't flood the fields, then weeds will try to compete with the plant. So, but with this SRI, what we call more crop per drop methodology, this allows us an opportunity to aerate the soil. And so by sending little weeders down the paths between the rows, and incidentally, that's one of the tenets of this new method of growing rice, is to take younger seedlings and plant them with plenty of spacing in rows. And you put them in rows so that when the weeds come up, you can take little hand weeders, go down the rows, aerate the soil. It turns the weeds back underground, so it forms more biomass to feed the plant. And the aeration is the key, because when you have oxygen entering the soil, that's when you're promoting more soil biota and all the nutritious qualities of the soil for the plants. Because the root systems can breathe, and because the water table is not so high, the roots actually dive down deeper. They form a bigger ball, a big root ball, and the big root ball actually allows the plant to have a more solid foundation. Because what happens when you plant the young single seedlings, they grow more tillers, the arms of the plant, than you normally would get. And from there, of course, more rice growing off those tillers. And so when we say more crop per drop is a way that farmers can use less inputs, less water, less seed, and no agrochemicals and get triple their yields, that's amazing, without reliance on chemical fertilizers or special seeds. So they can use traditional varieties of seeds. So going down those rows, weeding, using the single seedling, not flooding the fields. They're fairly simple things to do. And the reason why this methodology has spread to about 52 countries now is because farmers don't have to buy stuff. You don't have to buy machinery or tractors or high-yielding seed varieties, which are proprietary, and farmers have to buy them every year from a company. And you don't have to use synthetic or chemical fertilizers. You just use compost and organic matter and farm manure type of stuff, just stuff that's in balance with the farms already. And so what's really required is simply a change in mindset. It allows farmers to take control of their lives. I'll remind your audience that, or whoever's watching this, that these farmers that we're working with, it's kind of a risky supply chain, because these are $1 and $2 a day farmers, people that live below the poverty line. Typically, they own small plots of land, about a hectare or two of land. And but together, they can band together in cooperatives, have enough rice finally to feed their families throughout the year. Because imagine being a rice farmer and not having enough rice to eat. And that's the plight of a lot of rice farmers now. And so this is spreading throughout the world because it's empowering farmers without having to buy things. It's simply a change in mindset. Opens up a lot of avenues.
Are you finding that this is taking off at all in the United States?
Well, if it's taking off in the United States, it's, not to toot our own horn, but we do have to toot our own horn because nobody's doing this. We're the first company in the world that's taking these SRI grown rices, marketing them as more crop per drop, and making smarter, more sustainable choices for consumers to eat not only delicious but more nutritious rices that are grown more sustainably, that impact the environment, that impact the people who grow them in a positive way. And at the same time, consumers can be part of the solution to some of the major issues confronting us on the planet, such as food security, water scarcity, health issues like malaria, heating up the planet, climate change issues, all these kinds of things you really don't find wrapped up in a one type of product usually.
Right, because I didn't even think about the other issues that you brought up, which is malaria and climate change. Didn't even occur to me because I'm so focused on the arsenic issue.
Yeah, and I think, most people are not focused on a lot of these things. I think most people want a really great tasting rice that's delicious, nutritious, good for them. And oh, by the way, though, if you can provide some of these other benefits, I think this can really resonate with folks who want to kind of vote with their wallets and make a difference at the cash register in terms of the things that they think about and the things that they do that can make a difference. I think if anything, the economic downturn did for our economy and for people is to take stock of what's important to them and then try to do what they can to make things better.
Now let's talk about. You knew I was going to go there, the arsenic part, because that seems to be what's really in the news. And I'm really glad that you brought up climate change because I've also talked about methane gas a lot, especially about throwing out food. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about arsenic is that the whole issue with the arsenic is that rice seems to be very susceptible to sucking up arsenic because it thinks it's looking for silica, and with flooding the fields, it just makes it much easier for it to suck it up, and therefore we're eating arsenic. How, with your one crop per drop, have you guys been testing your rice to see your arsenic levels?
Yeah, so it's an important question. And so I'll start off by saying, we are marketers of rice, and we import unique varieties from smallholders all around the world. And we're not experts on arsenic, but rice is all that we do, so we're very interested in the topic, and we consult experts to inform our decision making and to then communicate to our consuming public. So arsenic in rice, well, let me just start with saying that arsenic is in many, many things, whether it's seafood, poultry, juice, beer, cheese, vegetables, bread, chocolate, all manner of things, including the oxygen we breathe. It's in rocks, it's in soil. And so it's not something that's inherently in rice. It's something as a result of the conditions in which the rice grows, and that would be the soil and the water. And so in the case of, in America, in rice growing fields in the South, and particularly like in Arkansas and Louisiana and maybe parts of Texas to a lesser degree, where they grew cotton in the past and used arsenic-based herbicides and pesticides, that contributed to the introduction of what was actually, what I understand to be organic arsenic, but
Inorganic.
It's inorganic and organic. I was, so introduction of arsenic through those pesticides. And then and it's interesting, I learned since that the U.S. government, the USDA, was actually involved in connecting folks who had been growing cotton to converting into growing rice.
Oh my gosh.
There was a concern saying, I guess they knew about the arsenic in the fields. There was concern, of course, about well, what about growing food stuff, not just cotton, in a field that has high levels of arsenic? And so, and that, I can cite the article, I can send it to you, or if anyone wants to look at it, but they said that then they put scientists to work to try and find varieties of rice that they could plant in these fields that would be resistant to arsenic, or could absorb larger amounts of arsenic and still grow, because the first crop they tried, I guess, failed. And so it's just really amazing to me that you would take cotton fields that were poisoned with arsenic and then consciously convert them to rice fields and then seek a solution like trying to get seeds that would be better acclimated to arsenic fields.
It's funny that you say that because they're actually working on at Purdue. They're working on a seed right now that is less arsenic sensitive.
Huh.
Yeah. So
the thing then is, okay, so now you have arsenic in the soil, and so the thing with flooding the fields, it creates like a direct avenue for the arsenic uptake into the root systems of the plant. If you didn't have flooded fields, then you'd have more, again, that oxygen flow, and the oxygen would kind of separate and would minimize the uptake of arsenic into the plant. So I guess it's a twofold thing. You should, as consumers, understand, is there arsenic in the soil where the rice was grown? And two, is the field, the way that they grow the rice, is it using flooded field technology like rice paddies? And suffice to say, not many people are doing that type of farming in America. Maybe some people experimenting, but commercially, no. And so that's the whole thing with the more crop per drop is not only can we mitigate some of these other things like methane and malaria, and I didn't even mention women's health problems when women are squatting in thigh-high water all day, and invariably it is the women who are doing the farming around the world. They have gynecological problems from all the flooded fields as well. So now we have arsenic, and so arsenic, that's a consideration because that's the ideal scenario for the uptake of the arsenic that could be in the soils or in the water. So again, it could be in the water. And so that takes, in my research, I was reading about the poultry industry. And they somehow like to feed poultry arsenic-type products. It somehow makes the meat pinker, and they have this perception that Americans want this pinker-looking, fleshy chicken product.
That's true.
And so then what do they do with the excrement from all those chickens? They use it in chicken manure type products. And guess what? A lot of them go into rice fields. Oops. So that may be a reason why you look at, I think there's even, I read something about some organic companies having arsenic in their products. And it could be because they're farming with chicken-laced arsenic type of byproducts.
Right.
So, I think it's like they say, you are what you eat. And I guess the same goes with plants and food that we create. And so I think that's the takeaway, is to find out what's in your soil and how they farming your food.
So have you guys been testing as well?
Yeah, so that's the other part of your question. So all of our rices we've tested at the USDA lab at Cornell University. And so we're happy to know that all of our rices fall below in the minimum categories. If you were referencing that Consumer Reports article,
yes,
they did testing on all kinds of rice, Europe, Asia. I think in Asia was like 0.07 was the number, and Europe and the US was 0.2, and Bangladesh was as high as 2.05 is the numbers I just took down. And they're measuring in parts per billion. And I know that there's a water standard for how much arsenic is safe for drinking. And I think the problem with some of this discussion is that people have been trying to superimpose the food arsenic levels and kind of compare them with the water. And I think it's a different thing. Because people obviously ingest more water on a daily basis than a food like rice. But for us, we're happy that the numbers are low. And the thing I think to think about is when you get those numbers from a lab, invariably they're the total arsenic. So just like when you go for your blood test for cholesterol, you get a total cholesterol, but then you have the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. And there's good arsenic and bad arsenic, and so the bad arsenic is the inorganic. And at this point, we haven't been able to identify a lab that can give us the breakout of inorganic and organic. But what I understand is that scientists, depending on who you're talking to, depending on the rice variety, anywhere from 10 to 80% of the total arsenic number can be the inorganic. But I think in general, scientists are using a 50% number. So if you had a particular total arsenic number, you just have that, and then you can consider that the number for inorganic arsenic. Now then the problem there, now that you've determined that, is there's no government number. The FDA, people in charge of food health and safety, they haven't determined what that number would be.
Right. That's my biggest issue with the petition, is because it's been out there for so long. This is not new news. Everybody's taking it as new news. It's been out there at least, I know it's been out there since 2007. It's probably been out there even longer. You worked with Cornell, and Cornell actually was one of my experts, and they were wonderful, walking me through all the issues and everything like that. One of the things that they did say that I thought was quite notable is that rice has different strains, meaning like a jasmine rice and a basmati rice, if I'm saying that right, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. They are different rices than the rices that are really grown in America, and they have a different relationship with arsenic. So I was wondering did I get that right?
It makes sense to me, but I wouldn't know on that level. I'm not an agronomist, and I'm certainly not I think you probably talked to Professor John Duxbury
yes.
at Cornell. He's an arsenic expert, and so I wouldn't want to venture into that. I'm just kind of repeating kind of things that we feel comfortable as a company saying, but I wouldn't want to get
No,
into
completely
the
understand.
specific species. But I think that makes sense. And I think, you look at a place like Bangladesh where they've had arsenic issues in well water, and I cited them as a place where there's particularly high incidence of arsenic. Um, and I think, when you have more and more people running out of water and drilling into groundwater reserves, then that can be another issue on the horizon in terms of the water quality that's going into growing crops as well.
One of the things also I wanted to talk to you about was when we had talked earlier, we talked about heirloom seeds. And I don't know if I told you, but I'm like a huge gardener and I only use heirloom seeds. And we talked about what kind of quality of crop you're getting from heirloom versus this genetically modified seed or hybrid seeds or all these other things that we're seeing out there now to assure that we get a good crop production. What's been your take on using your heirloom seeds?
Well, that's our mantra, that's our model. I mean, we work only with farmers who are working with traditional or what we call heirloom seeds. Um, we really feel that we need to be a voice and a force for preserving the biodiversity of not just rice, but of biodiversity on the planet. Um, we think that most of the innovation that is derived comes from our tremendous biodiversity, whether it's from rainforest or whether we're talking specifically about rice. There was some epidemic like I don't know if you call it epidemic, but there was a situation years ago that was recounted to me about rice in the Philippines, and it was some kind of a insect or a bug or a disease that was hurting the crop, and it was in jeopardy of being wiped out. And they found in a seed bank this variety that was considered kind of useless because it wasn't particularly high yielding, but that was the one that saved the day in the end because it was resistant to this particular disease, and I guess it helped to restore the balance in the fields so that all the rice crop wouldn't be wiped out. I may be misstating that a little bit, but I think the point is the types of seed that have survived millennia, the ones have won the battle, they need to be reckoned with. And there's something to say about having many kinds of plants in the ground rather than these monocultures, which leave us susceptible to things like disease. And so I think there's, for us as a marketing company, when you go and you find these heirloom varieties, now you're getting into the realm of, oh, this is really delicious, or this is so aromatic, or this has a particularly good cooking quality. The forces of agribusiness, they're not looking for any of these things. They're looking for high yielding, pest resistance, storability, things that have to do with scaling up, not having to do with the pleasures that people derive sitting around a table with friends and family enjoying food. And so we think all these things are important and actually contribute to the joy in life. And so we make it a point to work with farmers who want to preserve these varieties that are sacred or important to them historically, culinarily, and otherwise. And when farmers are like other farmers anywhere, they have to make choices, and many times they get seduced into planting these high-yielding varieties with the promise of getting more rice. But when you go visit these farms, they always seem to be planting in the back part of the property the ones they really want to continue to eat themselves. The others maybe they'll sell because they can sell and have more of it to sell. So, we're part of the non-GMO verification project, and so and we're all about moving things beyond organic, as I mentioned before. And so these are our initiatives, but we really think the more crop per drop is the biggest one, the sustainability, and at the same time preserve heirloom varieties and help farmers by paying them a fair trade wage. And the thing I think also about these other seeds and other varieties of rice like black rice and red rice and things like that, we're finding the science is catching up. Recently there have been reports about black rice providing beneficial aspects like anthocyanins, which are antioxidant properties. And of course, antioxidants, they seek out these free radicals that are mutating in your body, which are potentially cancerous cells, I guess. And so, it's kind of like when they talk about blueberries, have all these great attributes, and those are the antioxidants they're talking about. But in the rice, there's more of it and less sugar or no sugar and more fiber. And so now there's rumblings in the scientific community about red rice having what they call proanthocyanins, which could be actually higher in antioxidants than the black rice. So we're anxious to see what's going to happen with the red rice studies. But we know just from tasting them and how we feel that somehow these things are special and need to be preserved.
I'd be a little remiss if I didn't ask you how you got into this.
My wife is my partner, Carol, and she hates when I give my little short media answer. Several moments in succession of insanity is what I like to describe it as, but not really. When we went traveling through Asia looking for a business model, a business idea, when you're traveling, you have to eat. And we ate some miraculous varieties of rice and just came back with about 100 ideas about what we might do for a business. But the one that really resonated and made sense for us was seeing the diversity of rice and knowing that it was under pressure to go away. And we said we need to do our part in preserving biodiversity. And at the same time, there's plenty of advantages to go and find superior tasting and more nutritious rice and compete in the marketplace with that as an advantage. And then that's why I mentioned that light bulb moment when Cornell came to us asking if we'd like to work with them to help farmers to come, access markets, global market, using this new, more sustainable way to grow rice. And
So give me a little timeline. So was that the mid 90s that you got involved with Lotus Foods, and then
we took that first trip in 1993, and we imported our first. Was the red rice from Bhutan in 1994, late in 94, and we sold our first bag of rice in March of 95. And we basically a bootstrapped company. We didn't have a lot of resources. And so having relocated to the Bay Area in California, we had lots of upscale white tablecloth kind of chefs to kind of go around and see how they liked this stuff. And so we figured we'll just keep going until people tell us they don't like it. And so that was a long time ago. And we started working with chefs since we didn't have any money to put it in packages. But that was kind of a good way to start because, anytime these high-profile chefs would start off with our rice, it meant that they were putting their reputation on the line because they were validating what we were doing by using our rice on their menus. And so we started with chefs, and that spread to upscale stores like Williams-Sonoma, and then natural food stores like Whole Foods, and locally here places like Berkeley Bowl and Monterey Market. And so we just kept replicating that model, where we would go to places around the country like New York and Chicago and big cities and call on individual chefs. And once we had a following, we would go to their distributors and say, we're selling this to your customers. Why don't you take it on? And so we'd be able to replicate that and expand the customer base for these varieties of rice. And so that was about 18 years ago, I guess, if I'm doing the math right.
Wow, that's 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So back in, but what I read on your site is, I guess in 2005 is when Cornell kind of knocked on your door. So you've been into this crop, this more crop per drop for almost 10 years. Well, it's not yet, but
that was an idea. They came knocking on our door, actually cold called us. We met them at the Natural Products Show in Washington, D.C. But from that point, we started to travel with someone from Cornell. We first went to Madagascar, which, by the way, is the birthplace of this new revolutionary way to grow rice. It was a Jesuit priest agronomist named Father Lalane in the 70s, through observation in a corner of a rice field out there, saw that the water had flowed off the field, and the rice that was growing unflooded was actually doing much better than the rice that was underwater. And so they played around with that idea, and it's morphed into the present day system of rice intensification. And so while we started doing our travels to Madagascar and Cambodia and India, we really wasn't till last summer when we redesigned our new packaging and introduced it last summer. Prior to that, we had been bringing in small amounts of rice and selling it to in bulk bags to natural food stores and that type of thing. But we're really just getting going. And so I think on the back of our bags, this is a bag of Madagascar pink rice. And on the back, we have a little tagline up here. It says, "Be part of the solution." And so we're hoping that consumers get behind this idea once they learn that there are issues behind how rice is grown and how it creates a lot of problems, whether we're talking about malaria or methane or women's health issues. And as far as farmers who don't have enough rice to eat, this whole tripling or doubling or just increased yields with using less water and less seed and no chemicals and no special seeds. We think this is a win-win-win for the planet, for people, the people that farm it, the people that eat it, and also for companies like Lotus Foods, who we can't bring about this change unless we're profitable. And in this case, the farmers are profitable. So what I'm describing is a triple bottom line type of enterprise where we think we can not only be profitable ourselves, but impact positively the environment and people as well, socially.
It's really exciting. I mean, when I just got on your site and read just a little bit about it, I got so excited. But even listening to you talk now, it makes it even more exciting because there's so many other issues that you brought up that are really impacting us, that you're really making a difference. And that's very exciting to see a company do that.
It is exciting, and we feel very fortunate that this is something that came our way, or I don't know, we created that vibe in the universe for it to come our way, however you want to look at it. But if we don't, like our audacious goal is to change how rice is grown on the planet. Because as I mentioned, it's the number 2 man-made reason for methane emissions. If we don't scale up, if we don't transition from being a boutique rice company, then we're not moving the needle on any of these things like malaria or methane and global warming and water scarcity and all this stuff. So we really need to get the word out. That's why I'm very thankful for you to have this forum, to have this discussion, because people don't know. People are busy. People are overwhelmed. And so, but if little by little, one by one even, if people find out that there are issues behind rice and what those issues are, and that they can play a role for $4 at the register or whatever their store charges, that we can make a real go at this, and we can make change, and we can change the world by how we run our business and how people react to offerings like this. I think it's really exciting. Now is the time to kind of reverse some of the problems that have kind of plagued our planet. We've kind of made a mess of it, haven't we?